let's start with this, because there is a dynamic that is forming here that's been coming for a while. And the governors of, and we will get to the Bernie endorsing Biden, and we will talk more about the judge in Wisconsin in a moment. But this is when you're looking towards the future in terms of like what will be the next sort of weird, bizarre, I don't want to say post-apocalyptic, but there's this sort of like what would you call this, Matt? What's the word I'm looking for? It escapes me at the moment.
Dystopic?
Yes. We're in sort of like a dystopic, right? Like, I mean, like this sort of feels like a movie, right? Where, you see people walking around with masks and, you don't want to, and we're going to move through these different phases. And the weird ones are going to come soon with like, oh, I got tested. I have the antibodies. I can go out. I'm going to wear my medallion that says I got the antibodies tests. And I'm only hanging out with people who have the medallion. So, like, things are going to get weird in that way.
Yeah. You thought verified on Twitter was something?
Honestly, this has the potential to be very sort of like, I don't know. Maybe it'll be helpful for things. Like, it'll create a new set of class, right? But the other development that I think is going to be similar to this, and who knows where this goes. So on Monday, two different things happened simultaneously, almost simultaneously, and I imagine they spoke to each other. Andrew Cuomo, Democratic governor of New York, got together with the governor of New Jersey and Connecticut and Pennsylvania and Delaware and Rhode Island and Massachusetts. And they basically are going to send emissaries, if you will, a public health and an economic advisor to a regional working group, right? The chief of staff of the governor of each state will also be part of that group. And they're going to begin to design a reopening plan for these states, and presumably some type of timeline and some type of like metrics. This is when we open, when rate of infection hits this, or rate of death hits this, or when we have this amount of capacity in our ICUs. These will all be the metrics I presume that they will use, and more. And maybe they'll also have like some floors. Like, if unemployment hits this, or if economic activity hits this, then we're going to have to move forward with that. They're going to come up with some type of algorithm. Later in that day, California, Washington, and Oregon also announced that they were going to do more or less the same thing as these northeastern states were going to do. This came in the wake of Donald Trump claiming that he had the power to force all of these states to open up. So you've got these sort of like these coastal states that are forming their own little regional compacts, if you will. Other states, and all these states are blue states. I mean, the governor of Massachusetts is a Republican, but like a Massachusetts Republican. And you're going to have the red states. You guys got like Ron DeSantis down in Florida saying that the WWE is a essential service. That WWE is wrestling, world wrestling. And you're going to see sort of like some type of divergence. We're going to see, I'm not saying that we're going to have a secession or civil war type of situation, but I don't think that we're going to see anything that's sort of like polarized between the states and the federal government, probably since like the civil rights era, right? Except for in this instance, the president is on the side of the red states, as it were, And it has nothing to do with integration, but rather, coming out of these stay-at-home orders. So this is what is developing, and in part, it was a function of Donald Trump, I think, getting in front of people and saying, like, I have the power to do this. Here is a clip of Donald Trump at his presser yesterday. And let's start with Caitlin Collins first, because I think Ryan Lizza followed it up after that. And this is in the White House press room. And Trump claims that he has total authority to reopen the country. Let's see if that's true.
A quick question about something you just said. You said when someone is president of the United States, their authority is total. That is not true.
Okay, you know what we're going to do? We're going to write up papers on this. It's not going to be necessary because the governors need us one way or the other, because ultimately it comes with the federal government. That being said, we're getting along very well with the governors, and I feel very certain that there won't be a problem. Yeah, please, go ahead.
Has any governor agreed that you have the authority to decide when their state...
I haven't asked anybody, because I don't. You know why? Because I don't have to. Go ahead, please.
But who told you the president has the total authority?
Enough. Please.
You mentioned the vice president.
Enough. All right, that was actually the second one. So let's go to Ryan Lizza. I mean, this is fascinating. There are examples of the federal governments forcing states to do stuff, but forcing it through leveraging things like back when I was 18, Ronald Reagan said, raise your drinking ages. And it wasn't specifically aimed at me. I don't think. Raise your drinking age to 21 or you're going to lose your federal highway funds. And every state did it. Connecticut was a little bit late. I know that because I went to college in Connecticut and got to drink for the first semester, a year or so that I was there. And Washington, D.C., because they didn't receive any federal funds, I believe, in terms of their highways. They were lagging behind, too, for quite some time. So there is a precedent for this type of thing, but that's all statutory. I don't know what Donald Trump is talking about when he can leverage governors, but here is when he tells Ryan Lizza from, I think this guy's from the New Yorker, why Donald Trump has total authority to reopen the country.
Clarify your understanding of your authority vis-a-vis governors. Just to be very specific. For instance, if a governor issued a stay-at-home
When you say my authority, the president's authority, not mine, because it's not me. This is when somebody's the president of the United States, the authority is total. And that's the way it's got to be.
Total. Your authority is total.
It's total. It's total. And the governors know that.
So if
the governors know that. Now you have a couple of bands of excuse me. You have a couple.
Could you rescind that order?
You have a couple of bands of Democrat governors, but they will agree to it. They will agree to it. But the authority of the President of the United States having to do with the subject we're talking about is total.
Wow. And he was questioned that before and afterwards by Caitlin Collins. And he said, well, we're going to write up papers on it. I guess presumably that's the Office of Legal Counsel is going to try and come up with some story as to how Donald Trump is total authority over the governors in terms of their issuing a state of emergency in their own states and requiring people to stay at home, et cetera, et cetera. This is going to be fascinating to watch. And the interesting thing is that because the federal government has been such a disaster and failure in providing resources to the states, they don't have much leverage in holding things back. It's one of the problems with making your kid, the states independent in this respect. I know this with my own kids. Like I made the mistake of forcing them to learn how to feed themselves. And now I have no leverage with them. They can go and eat. I can't tell them to do stuff and threaten to withhold making food for them. So This is going to be interesting to see where this goes between the states and Donald Trump.
And John Yu's office.
More like Bill Barr's pet project right here, I would say.
Right. I mean,
it's what he's made for.
You was the guy from the Office of Legal Counsel who said that torture was okay. But Bill Barr, I mean, this is Bill Barr's sort of wet dream. How do I come up with, expand on the, unitary executive theory?